Um, so, um, you know, it's a matter of, what do we need to work on first? A few weeks ago when we started the block party, for me, it was like at the top of my radar are collective superintelligence and solar radiation management to cool the planet. That was it, the two biggies. And now we've got coronavirus. So it's still collective superintelligence and coronavirus and cooling the planet and a bunch of other things. So it's like we're really being asked and tasked with a holistic transformation of our entire planet and certainly our entire species, with, of course, massive impacts on all the other species, depending on where we go from here as a species. Um, Welcome, Dylan. Just in time. We just wrapped up a 2-hour segment with Dr. Silas Rao, and now we're kind of feeling our way forward, where to go from here. And I was about to propose that we take maybe a little food break or something. And I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from you, Dylan. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you, unless you can mute yourself, which would, of course, be preferred. I'm not even sure you can hear me, Dylan. Maybe you're having a connection issue or something. Okay, Dylan, I'm going to mute you. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Dylan. And welcome to whoever just joined. I can't see your name. It says Galaxy J7 Prime. That's a pretty cool name if that's your name. I'd like to be walking down the street and everyone's like, yo, Galaxy. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Hey, how's it going? That's my buddy Galaxy. Anyway, so if your name is Galaxy, welcome. And if your name is not Galaxy, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Shall we take a few-minute break and maybe get some, I mean, I've been at this for 7 hours straight, so I need to at least get some lunch going. All right, why don't we pause recording, take a few-minute break. It's 8 minutes after the hour. What would work for people? 15 minutes? I'm just checking it. Should we take a 15-minute break? All right, so 15 minutes from now would be 23 minutes after the hour. All right, that seems like a popular idea. Okay, so we'll resume at 23 after the hour. In the meantime, feel free to chat it up. And I'll be here within earshot, so I may be chatting it up as well. But I'm just saying, let's all give each other some room. All right, we'll be resuming officially again at 23 minutes after the hour. We'll see you at 1:23. It's easy to remember. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, 1:23. Well, that's 1:23 Pacific time. All right, we'll see you all shortly. So the big question is, how do we do it? How do we reorganize society, civilization, to enter fundamentally a whole different modality of life where so much of the old world is shutting down, going into hibernation, or just being canceled completely. And I think it still feels to me like we're still just wrapping our heads around this new reality. And but we don't have really the luxury of time for two reasons. Number one, as people, if people don't have access to food, and that really means getting food delivered to them, because we can't have people out and about now. We basically need to be quarantined. So we need to figure out food delivery systems so that people, A, don't go hungry, and B, don't go desperate. Because having whole segments of the population desperate and running out of food is a formula for total civilization collapse and violence and theft and all kinds of problems, as well as accelerated spread of the virus. Welcome back, Dylan. Great to see you, bro.
Can you hear me okay? Just checking my mic.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. When you first got on, it was kind of a weird.
Okay,
But anyway, you're
continue.
totally good. Yeah, thank you. Um, so, how do we, um, make sure everyone is taken care of nutrition-wise and in terms of basic needs? And then, given that so much of the economy is slowed down or ground to a halt, we now have that scenario that Professor Guy McPherson has been warning us about for years, that if we had a contraction in the global economy and a reduction of even 20% of particulate emissions, then we could see a rise in global average temperatures of 1 degree centigrade very, very quickly. And even without that, we're on track to melting all of our ice in the next few years. Dot mentioned that we should get Sam Khurana here. I could not agree more. Let's get Sam Khurana. Let's get Paul Beckwith. Let's get, everyone here who we can. And yeah, exactly. ACE is pointing out that if we had another 1 degree centigrade bump, that would bring global average temperatures to over 3 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial. So we have a very limited window of time in which to simultaneously ensure that everyone in the world is fed, and then very quickly, in parallel with that, we need to roll out solar radiation management. We need to cool the planet. And up until the coronavirus really reaching everyone's consciousness as the emergency that it is, we were laser focused on SRM, and we had a major, existential emergency on our hands just with that alone. Remember the good old days when all we had to worry about was cooling the planet? Well, now we've got much bigger challenges and a much tighter time frame within which to work, given the loss of global dimming, which is happening. So, it feels like we're a football team and it's halftime and we're down a bunch of points and we've got some injuries, and it's just, it's a very hard situation to be in. At the same time, this situation also holds tremendous amount of promise, in that we can now, with so many people at home, and you can't go out and meet people out in public anymore, let's meet online, right? And let's leverage this opportunity to bring humanity together and manifest the collective superintelligence that we've been building towards. Because once we get that going, we can solve all these problems. I was talking about earlier this last week on earlier meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday, Thursday as well, that there, a quote from Abraham Lincoln, President Lincoln, that goes like this: if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. Now, Jorge, I love trees as much as you, so I'm not using it for that, but just the point is preparation and tooling up. Well, collective superintelligence is the ultimate tool, humanity. It is the ultimate tool for cranking out all of these solutions that we're so hungry for, so desperate for, in fact. So, if President Lincoln's mom came out to the backyard and said, "Hey, why aren't you chopping down that tree I told you to chop down 2 hours ago?" and he's there sharpening the axe, there's something sort of counterintuitive. Hey, you're supposed to be chopping down a tree. What are you doing, sharpening a piece of steel? Well, I need this to chop down the tree. We need collective superintelligence in order to solve our problems. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. Am I just like crazy? Am I wrong? Or am I right? I mean, what do you think? So
I think that you're like right on track. I have been experiencing the same thing over Basecamp in Vegan World. Like I see a lot of enthusiasm of so many people there wanting to get hands-on, right? Like, let's do this. But like the quote that you shared, there's also a similar quote from Einstein that says, like, if my life depended on solving a problem and I only had 1 hour, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the right question. No? So you can't jump into, yeah, like, let's start doing. Though it sounds really good, right? But I think that that reminds me of what you shared the first few days that I heard you talking, Jamin. And you were saying, like, we have the capacity now to model, to prototype. Like, there's so much information already out there. And to some, we have access, no? We love using Google Maps and stuff like that. But there's more data available. And I remember you saying, yeah, like, imagine, like, retrofitting a city or something like that. You said, no, like, with all the information, like how to make it completely sustainable and figuring out where to get the water and where to put the trees and where to put the mirrors. Maybe like back then, I don't know if you were talking already about mirrors in the ocean, but I heard you saying these things, huh? So I support that, like, to really think, okay, what are we going to do and what do we need to prepare for before spending our time, spending our money, spending resources, and having maybe just one shot at it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we were commenting earlier that suddenly this week on the block party, there's been a little dip, or maybe more than a little, in the attendance, and I think that can be explained by the fact that people are running around, stocking up, making preparations for what's here and for what's coming. You know, yeah, Nolan, go ahead.
So my mom, who's a secretary at an elementary school in Vancouver, Washington, texted me, Governor just announced all schools closed until April 27th. Our district is coming up with a plan to deliver food to families. Sounds like they're going to use bus drivers to distribute food.
Dylan, we're getting some kind of weird feedback from you. It shows that your microphone is muted, but we're still hearing noise. Okay, now you've gone silent, Dylan. So that's okay. Okay, so all schools in the state of Washington, Western Washington, Eastern Washington, and I don't know of any decree to shut down restaurants, but I think restaurants are probably not too far behind. And gotcha, Dylan. Thank you. So bus drivers are going to distribute food. School bus drivers. Interesting. Very interesting. And does it say who the food's going to be distributed to? Is it just the children, or are we talking broader?
I don't know. I'm going to guess though that the school has some kind of information as to maybe who is in particular need. I don't know this for sure, but I'm sure they have some kind of way of prioritizing that. What I read to you is literally all she sent me, and it's all I know. I'm doing a little bit of Google searching as we're talking here.
Yeah, very good, very good. And back to what Jorge and I were talking about, whether it's a quote from Einstein or from Abraham Lincoln.
Not involved in chopping down trees.
Exactly. And I just thought of a better one. If I had 6 hours to plant a bunch of trees, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening the shovel.
Very nice.
But in any case, the point is that now is our window of opportunity. And we really need to get this collective superintelligence going. And this is the meeting place for it. This is the only meeting place that I know of for it that blocks off 24 hours and does it every week. So, and therefore creates a platform for the world to come together, regardless of what country you're in. And so I want to make a plea to everyone listening and in this meeting and whoever will watch it later, and to please also spread the word. The plea is, let's come together. Let's come together and meet and collaborate and build out this collective superintelligence so that we can then solve all of our problems, come up with these amazing solutions. Because if you think, oh, it might take 6 months to come up with a solution for this or that or the other, in the normal paradigm, bring in collective superintelligence and we'll be able to come up with that solution, I don't know, maybe in a day, right? There is so much data out there. There's so much wisdom. There's so much knowledge. There's so much experience, so many skills. We need to bring the right combinations of people together in order to come up with the right specific solutions. And we need all of us together as a unified collective superintelligence for many, many reasons. One is so that we know where to direct people to which problems need solution, and people with which skills are needed for which to be part of which conversations to come up with which solutions. And we also need this to be an integrated whole so that we can look at the whole world, all of our problems, all of our opportunities holistically, and come up with solutions that solve many problems at once, or whole sets of solutions which solve many, many problems at once. So what we're doing here, even though the waters have gotten a little bit choppy right now with the coronavirus and people scrambling around, people don't necessarily feel that they have time to come to a meeting, etc. Beatrice, welcome. Welcome. Good to see you. So I was just saying that even though people may be scrambling and panicking and whatnot, this is not something that we can afford to give up on, collective superintelligence. And it is something that is so close at hand. We have the technology, we have the tools. Look at this beautiful Zoom video conference. We have the ability to automatically transcribe, not without errors, it'll have errors, but I'd rather have a transcription with errors than no transcription. A text transcription of these meetings that we can then do all kinds of stuff with in the future. But for starters, we'll be able to search for topics and find those meetings that are having those topics. Now, of course, that becomes relevant, much more relevant once we fan out and have multiple conversations going in parallel, right? So I think a number of you were not on earlier when I did a screen share and showed a couple images. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. These are images about the big picture of collective superintelligence that I'm proposing, just to kind of make it a bit more visual and a bit easier to digest. So I'm going to screen share now. And please jump in if you have any comments or questions at any time. So this picture shows a sequence of 8 stages. Think of it as like a yellow brick road with 8 big bricks. 1, 2, follow my mouse, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It starts here in the lower left with the conversational domain. Here we are having conversations, talking about our problems, talking about solutions, talking about strategy, etc. And in a way, this whole big picture represents a strategy for coming up with optimal solutions. But it all starts in the conversational domain with us talking with each other, recording and broadcasting these conversations, transcribing them, making them searchable, etc. And out of these conversations, 1 second, I just need to take the rice off the stove. I'll be right back.
Just want to do a mic check if people can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound good.
Yeah, you sound good.
Oh,
Dylan.
much better. Perfect.
Yeah, we hear you.
So out of these conversations, a lot is going to emerge, but I'm just kind of taking it in sequence here. The very first thing that's emerging is a deep understanding of our problems, our solutions, and I would add to that, a deep understanding of ourselves and each other. We're getting to know the rest of this segment of humanity that really cares and cares enough to put ourselves out there publicly and to pioneer this collective superintelligence. So we're understanding our problems, solutions, ourselves, our community, and we're developing visions of global transformation. And out of these visions and out of this understanding, we'll be able to create the beginnings of a systematic framework for solving all of our problems and getting all of our needs met as best we can, right? Obviously, a species that's gone extinct is extinct forever. So I'm not saying we're going to get 100%, but with the proper framework, we can get as close as possible. So here I put, for example, there's a whole world framework that we've been developing, which I can show more details of later, that basically starts with a single vision of a whole world and then breaks that down into a whole inverted tree. I hope you get the idea here that this is just a portion of the tree and the ... says, hey, it's really much bigger. We're talking about a vast taxonomy to organize and make explicit all of the needs of a whole world. Needs for people, needs for all species, needs for all ecosystems and life supporting systems. And as you continue to break it down into smaller and smaller units, you get to a point where we have these leaf nodes. So if this is a big upside down tree, at the very extremities, you'll have leaves. These are what we call leaf node needs. But the bigger point is that we come up with a complete set of needs, a taxonomy of needs and goals for the entire world. And that can all be rolled into what in technical speak we would call an objective function, which is really just a set of all the goals to put together. And once we have all of our goals clear, all of them, then that's the perfect context for generating solutions, holistic solutions that address multiple goals at once. And there's one methodology for that is brain swarming, which we can talk about later. And it basically just generates a huge spectrum of solutions across many different possibilities. Now, this is idea generation, ideas of solutions. From these ideas, we can take the best ideas and then go on to the design phase and actually create detailed designs of the solutions based on those ideas. Once we have that design, then we can plug it into the next stage, which is modeling, a computer model of that solution. And global holistic modeling, where we model myriad combinations of solutions simultaneously to model all the interactions and the intended consequences and the unintended consequences. And because there are infinite numbers of combinations of solutions that are possible, we need to find the best combination. And that's where we introduce an optimization layer around the model, which can then basically automatically, using artificial intelligence, plug in and play with different combinations of solutions and iterate and iterate and iterate until we find the optimal or best possible set of solutions and detailed implementation plans. So just as quick review, these are 8 steps to holistic planetary healing and thriving. It all starts with conversations, in fact, a rich conversational domain that in fact follows the whole process all the way around. There's conversations throughout. So Zoom video conferencing, or whatever platform we ultimately net out with, is our way of tracking and shepherding solution development all through the cycle. But before we can talk solutions, we need to have an understanding and a framework, a model. Okay, now we can come up with ideas. The best ideas get passed on to design. Once they're designed, they can be modeled. And then the optimizer, the optimization layer combined with the model will determine what is the best set of solutions. So anyway, wanted to share this big picture because this for me is a picture of collective superintelligence organized into a series of stages. I'm not suggesting this is the very best picture that it could possibly be, but this gives the idea. And I wanted to use it as a starting point for conversation, as this is such an, for me, this is the most urgent thing right now. Bringing humanity together with a vision and the intention of building a planetary collective superintelligence with which we can generate thousands, ultimately millions of solutions if that's what required. As many solutions that are required, that's how many we're going to develop. But we need to be organized.
I have a question, Jamin.
Yes, okay.
So we know that there's very polarized approaches to get the world that everybody says that they want, right? Where is the filter that would allow the solutions to be selected, not from a majority, but from the super intelligence approach, like and you pointed out in your graphic, like where this would happen. For example, talking about vegan land management approach and grazing cows land management approach. Like where in this drawing or in this graphic would one or the other transcend to be part of the holistic modeling? I don't know if my question is clear.
No, it's a great question. Really, really great question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So thank you. I would say, it starts in the conversational domain with all of us getting together and talking about, what is really important. And for example, the debate between vegan land management and land management with grazing is a debate with so many different dimensions and variables. I think, that debate begs for data and modeling that can synthesize and say, look, ideally we'd have side-by-side comparisons between the two approaches for different kinds of climates and geographies and soil types and whatnot. And so, in the end, lots of different solutions are going to be effectively competing, but I see it as much more of a cooperation. But all myriad different solutions are essentially going to be competing for which are the solutions that actually get implemented versus the ones that we say, no, that doesn't make the cut, right? I'm going to go back to gallery view here. I can always share again if people need to see, because I see we got, yeah, Dot makes a really good point. I don't think, she says, I don't think it's an issue of data. There's a difference in philosophy. So what I read from that is that even if the data were to show that with livestock grazing in a particular framework and context could regenerate soil and whatnot, there are those who are simply opposed to using animals in that way for grazing or for anything for that matter. So there is definitely a difference in philosophy, and what that may translate to is that certain types of solutions get implemented in certain parts of the world and others get implemented in other parts of the world, depending on the respective philosophies, beliefs, religions, even of those different parts of the world. So, but let's make this a conversation. I'm just opening it up for a conversation. These are really great questions and feedback, everyone. So please keep it rolling.
I would say just a few points of that. It's all about prioritizing different, it's just about prioritizing at this point. And some levers have to be pulled faster than others. And I think, at the current stage of looking at the whole holistic picture, even down to, identity politics and all the other things that go along with policies, I'm looking at the whole situation where we have to start implementing some radical utility decisions just to allow us some time to work out these other issues that are more cultural and more philosophical. But there's definitely some, we're going to have to implement certain things to buy us time to actually come together. And we have to come together to deploy these other mechanisms. But I'm just saying we have to, we need a longer time period, and maybe it's going to take generations. And it really is probably going to come down to a new education format, especially when everyone's coming onto the internet online for the first time. There's billions still not on the internet and not even joining these conversations. So I think there is going to be a multi-generational approach, and there's probably going to be, maybe 10% of us deploying solutions like SRM to buy us some of that critical extended time to start restructuring the civilization, with the goal of actually getting to a type 1 civilization, which would be, control of the water, the soils, the atmosphere. So we just have to put our priorities in position, and there's other groups out there that have been working on agendas that have been many, many generations, and some of them are not very good agendas. So we might have to start thinking that way, including even life extension type technologies to even oversee some of these things. So that's a mouthful, but that's just my initial thoughts on, how to tackle a lot of these things. And I think it's going to come down to a meritocracy alignment, where we're basically just all backing what we're doing by the science, by the data, of kind of making sure that our life systems are still intact to continue these discussions, to bring, for the goals of bringing balance to the full planet with humanity. So that's my comment there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, meritocracy is a really good word. I really, obviously, I think the best ideas for solutions and the best solutions themselves developed from those ideas will both bubble to the top. And
that's the idea. Yep.
Yeah. And also, ultimately it'll be up to people in each part of the world, in each country, state, county, township, etc., to choose which solutions they're going to implement. So, for example, if the people of Eastern Zimbabwe decide to all go vegan and the people in Western Zimbabwe decide to you know, graze animals for holistic land management with grazing, you know, that's what they're going to do, right? So for me, the key is to give all the people of Zimbabwe all the best options so that they can, you know, either as a country implement whatever set of solutions makes the most sense to them, or, you know, different regions of the country do it in different ways. So I don't see like some big collective dictatorship or something saying, you know, one central authority is going to make the ultimate decisions. I believe it's really going to be up to the people in each region.
And that's the education piece. Again, a lot of these regions aren't educated about really any of the high level solutions we're discussing. A lot of it's just ignorance, unaware. You know, just they don't have access to the internet, for instance. There's a lot of distractions. They're also trying to feed themselves, and that's a challenge in their given situation. So there's just a lot of foundational requirements to give room and freedom to be educated properly, and to fully take data in without that scarcity mentality that they're pretty much constantly under. And now it's just ticked up a few notches with the coronavirus at our heels. So that's all to be taken into consideration. You know, education really is going to be a massive piece, but luckily, you know, again, with the collective superintelligence framework, and even when we're going up with the virus that's hitting everybody, you know, people will be in isolation. People will look for inputs to start reaching out, and start communicating because they're going to be in cabin fever land. So I do feel like this platform, if we can get a little bit more awareness of it in our different circles and channels, you know, we can start getting more and more people almost exponentially to start kind of, you know, coming together and talking about where things are at with everybody, just to open up a forum to let people have some emotional contact, because that's going to be going away physically for people. So that's another service that I'm seeing we could really position ourselves well, and start broadening those conversations as the virus takes hold, state by state and country by country. So just some comments there.
I love it. I love that, Dylan.
And my youngest brother just texted me saying school is canceled until April 27th due to the virus outbreak. That is a 44-day break. Wow. So there's, gonna be.
Yeah, we need a silo for kids. We need a silo for students to start talking on this platform. You know, that's something maybe Nolan, you could help bring a few pieces to it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, Greta would be great. I always bring up Greta because she's kind of she could bring pretty much a tornado of participation from the younger generations that are striking, to all the kids that will be on permanent school strike. Now that schools are closing, they're just going to be marching around probably. So, or staying inside, of course. It's a totally different world now. But, you know, different people with those influences and those megaphones are definitely going to be needed. And I don't know what they're going to be doing isolated. I'm sure Greta's not flying anywhere. You know, it's just going to be kind of a different landscape that's emerging that we have to start understanding very quickly. So it's, you know, I think what we're doing is perfect. I think we're just, we're preparing ourselves for any probability. And it's day by day right now. So, you know, I'm kind of feeling that we're just going to look maybe towards, you know, look from the perspective of the Radish team of, you know, we just got to start getting much more social media stuff going on, like Twitter, Facebook groups, maybe getting into some groups on Facebook and just kind of mentioning what we're doing. The world's very connected right now. So that might be just one strategy moving forward, that maybe that's going to be more of the focus that I would suggest, is just, you know, utilizing our tech and start reaching out because everyone's going to be home pretty soon anyway. So do you understand? I'm rambling a bit, but you get what I'm saying.
No,
Um,
no, you're totally
yeah.
good. And I just want to pause for a moment and welcome Michael Gallo, who is normally with us every week, but now due to the coronavirus and all that, he's been involved with the local community there, which is very commendable and actually a huge part of what we've been talking about earlier today. So hello, Michael, and welcome. I know you got a busy day, a lot on your plate. Your microphone's muted, and that's okay. But I'm really glad you checked in. You've got your Michael Gallo fan club right here. So
hey guys, hey everyone. Awesome, thanks, Jamin. Yeah, thanks for relaying that. And yeah, I was totally aiming to have a regular meeting today and be prepared on some topic involving, the story of the times and the psychology of the times, and then by this morning I just realized not only don't even really have a coherent topic in mind, I'm not prepared, and I'd spent several hours this morning, sending communications and helping to co-lead, the local community in what's being organized around our current crisis. But I'm here anyways. Thanks for inviting me, Jamie. I think it's good to be here. I just want to check in, and I don't think I could stick around for too long, but I'm totally open to just co-creating something now for 15, 20 minutes. We can just go off of whatever conversation was previously going to this, or if we want to go into some area that we've talked about before for a little while, or something totally new. I love to talk about anything interesting. So how's the pulse happening today?
Definitely. Yeah.
No, go. Yeah.
Well, definitely a focus on, the epidemic as we see it. And there's just lots of maneuvering, lots of emotional feedback. There's a lot going on. And actually, Michael, I'd love to hear what your status update is, just from your intuition, your energy. Just what are you feeling? What are you seeing? Love to hear any feedback. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll share my perspective on it. Generally, going back a few weeks ago, I was really not concerned at all. I was really more in the camp of going, just as I usually do. I was just noticing how the media was completely spinning the news. And of course that's the case. I've been aware of this for decades. Most of us have. This is no surprise that the media will both exaggerate and expound and maybe even distort what's really happening. And perhaps there's even unseen forces behind the media initiating this for a vast global agenda of control. I'm not
totally agree.
I'm not throwing that out at all. I've been in that conversation for at least 10 years. I've done my research. I've gone way down the rabbit hole of conspiracy. I know these things are real. The conversation goes very, very, very deep. Now, with that said, that was where I was a couple weeks ago. I was just basically just ignoring it, going, this is probably mostly just hype and they're getting us scared. And it's true. And I'm not discounting that. But at the same time, more recently, I'd say about the last 2 weeks, I actually started to do some research, and I'm realizing, well, just because that's happening doesn't mean there's actually not a real virus. Okay, so we have both a media virus. Yes, of course, that's obvious. We've had that going on for a long, long, long time. There's always media viruses. I don't think we can expect that to go away. Okay, but in this specific case, there's also an actual biological virus that, if you look at the data, it is more dangerous than the common flu. It says, it's hard to discern all this, in our social media environment, which is so much information going around. It's hard to know what's true, what's not true. Most people do not have the time or attention to really dig deep enough to try to discern what the real facts are. And so most of the information out there coming from most of those people. So you kind of have this surface of just generalizations, and back that up with most people don't want to believe this is true, don't want to feel afraid. We haven't had any kind of pandemic since 2009. The last pandemic, and pandemic means it's a global, virus. The last one was 2009. And I don't even really remember being scared from that. But this, according to the biologists and the experts, this virus is, it's a little bit more concerning, because of the way it propagates with the delay of. I think we all know some of these facts, I guess, because of the delay of people can actually have the virus without showing symptoms for days or weeks, yet they're still infectious. So that's what's really critical about this. So here's the point. So with all that said, so much to talk about. And this got brought up last night, because last night here in Mount Shasta, we have a dance event every Thursday called Ecstatic Dance, which is part of the global ecstatic dance community. And it's something I go to almost every single week. It's a really strong community. It's a really great event. It's kind of like one of the best things we have going on here in Mount Shasta. And I went because it had been announced that after the dance, we were going to have a little community gathering to talk about how we were going to deal with this coronavirus. And so I went specifically to have that conversation, because actually I feel like, especially here in Mount Shasta, a lot of people I feel like are generally less informed. They tend to be writing more. Writing more new agey and conspiracy prone perspectives. Which I'm not saying that's not true. It's just they tend to just do that and dismiss everything else. And so I really wanted to go and kind of try to balance out the conversation, just get practical. Because here's the thing, it's like here's the thing, I won't be surprised, and I'm not saying this is going to definitely happen, but I was surprised within 2 weeks from now that people will start really waking up to what's going on. If we look at what's really happening in Italy, what's really already happening in China, that, there's a lot of people dying, right? It's more than the flu. It's not like, it's not the plague yet or anything like that, but there are people dying, okay? And that's just the key point. There's people dying. So, and I think that America's kind of next in line to really get the reality of that. And we're still waking up to it. I think it's really rare. American culture tends to be very isolated from these kinds of things. If you remember 9/11, 9/11 was the first attack we had inside the borders of the United States. It was a huge shock to our American citizens. And this is the same kind of thing. It's very rare that we have any kind of invasion at all into the United States. I think there's a lot of denial about what's really going on. Naturally, it's natural, but yet the longer that we're in denial about just taking basic precautions to what's a very natural phenomena that maybe it's manipulated, maybe it was produced by a secret lab, by the CIA, whatever, but nonetheless, it is a virus. So, we have to still respond responsibly. So I'm just trying to communicate both of these sides. We can take both a metaphysical and intellectual approach that expands all things included, but also we have to take just a very practical approach to mitigating the damage and deaths that could happen. Because here's the thing. So with my specific situation with Ecstatic Dance, if let's say in 2 weeks from now, that things have progressed, that the numbers start to go up exponentially. This is not a linear progression. The numbers will go up exponentially. The deaths will start doubling every 4 days, and that can go up to hundreds or hopefully just thousands of cases of deaths, and no more than that. But it could go much higher, possibly, depending on how we respond to it. So just taking that into consideration, let's say in 2 weeks from now, let's say there's hundreds and hundreds of cases inside the United States, maybe thousands of cases of deaths in the United States. Hopefully not, but let's just say hundreds of cases in the United States of deaths. Maybe it's mostly elderly people or people that have compromised immune systems, whatever, they're deaths of people that wouldn't have died otherwise. Okay. So with that said, if that's the case, let's say in 2 weeks from now, and basically speaking, America takes the general protocol like most other countries are doing right now, of having a societal shutdown, basically shutting down businesses, shutting down schools, encouraging people to stay home, especially if you're sick, this kind of thing, right? So if we chose in Mount Shasta to have an ecstatic dance, and by the way, the entire ecstatic dance community, which is a global community, is pretty much entirely behind immediately stopping ecstatic dances, right? But all of a sudden, the Mount Shasta leaders are going, no. We want to do it anyways. We're special. We're Mount Shasta. We're above all this. Okay, so I'm like, wait, why are we above this? Like what? Okay, so let's say in 2 weeks from now, let's say we have an ecstatic dance, and let's say just 20 people come to that ecstatic dance. And let's say that there's one person who has the virus, And they don't know they have the virus because they're not showing any symptoms. They're a healthy person. They're healthy. They meditate every day. They're taking all the mushrooms and nutrients. So they're like fully confident they're not going to get sick. Fine. They're not going to get sick, but they have the virus in them and they're still contagious, but they don't know it. And so they come to the dance, just one person of 20, and they say they only pass it to one other person at the dance. And so now that second person, and everyone has a great time. Everyone has ecstatic dance, such a good time. We're not concerned. There is no fear. We'll just have a good time. Then the dance stops. Now this second person who was only infected because this group came together, they leave and they go to the home and they visit their roommate and they hang out and they give it to their roommate without knowing it. And the roommate's often really, really healthy and all this, but they get the virus, they don't know it. And then that roommate, then the next day, so we have a third person who's been infected because of the gathering. That third person now goes and they visit their elderly mother, who's already had a compromised immune system for a number of years. And they unintentionally and unknowingly pass it to their mother. And their mother then gets the virus. So without knowing where it came from, we already don't know that it came from this gathering because no one has symptoms. But now their mother gets it. She does get symptoms. She gets very, very sick. And within a week, she dies. Okay? What if that happened? If that happened, no one would know. At ecstatic dance, no one knows that happened. But yet it did happen because they went against the collective protocol that we're all trying to cohere with to just protect the people who could die from this. And I just think that's just a fact of the way that networks work and the way the virus is passed along. It's just a fact. And maybe it can be alarming and maybe it's I don't mean to be fearful, but yet, I feel like in some sense there's a natural fear to something like this. It's, like, let's make another analogy. If we're in the forest, in the wilderness, here's a story. You're in the forest one day and you're out there singing your song and having a good time. And all of a sudden a big grizzly bear comes along and it's looking at you angrily and starts running at you. It is going to try to kill you. It is natural to fear that bear, okay? It is not, and it is not helpful to fear the fear and try not to fear fear. And it's just stand and go, I'm not going to fear the bear. And maybe if I don't fear it, it'll lick me and hug me, right? Okay. People are fine to take that approach, but here's the thing, that's just a demonstration of it's natural sometimes to fear fear. Fear can be a natural thing. And we shouldn't fear feeling fear. And I think that's what's going on a lot right now in our social media is people are afraid to be afraid. And they're almost like denying that there's anything to be afraid of. And that can be dangerous, because if you stand there and don't be afraid of the bear too long, then the bear is going to bite your head off. And then you would wish you'd been a little bit afraid too long. So this is my basic approach right now. I think that, that fine, most of us won't get sick. Most of us are really healthy. But, in this, I'll just finish up with this. In this time of when we are probably going into increasing chaos and crisis in the planet for the next 10 years or so, this is a test of how we might, in the context of collective intelligence, how are we each as individuals being conscious of the responsibility we have in mitigating any unhealth and damage to our collective by the actions we take, and by being responsible to simply be prepared to isolate ourselves and entertain the social distancing thing. Now that maybe we're being manipulated to do this by a government. That's a different conversation, but if people's mothers are dying because people are going against what is just common sense and a natural fear against something that actually does kill people, that brings up some moral questions in my opinion. It's a basic moral question. Is gathering, in my case for this local community, is gathering for the sake of having an ecstatic dance at the risk of even just one person dying? If that one person died because these people are gathering, despite what the collective is saying, the democratic is saying, no, we should do this, and one person dies, was it worth it to celebrate at the cost of someone dying? So, that's where I'm at. I'll just wrap up. That I have so much more to say about, but that's where I'm at currently. That's the current local situation I'm dealing with. Of going this is how we be responsible now. sooner we act, maybe the less deaths we'll see. That's it.
And you see, you're aware of the data that it's a 5-week latency period. You know,
What do you mean by latency period?
you don't show symptoms for 5 weeks, and you're still shedding the virus to everybody.
Yeah, I've heard a variable between 4 days and 5 weeks. I'm not sure, but it's got a latency. That's for sure. Something got a
Yep.
latency. That's
And
one
one
of the most concerning things.
undocumented case, they're projecting one undocumented case basically infects 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So that's
Mm.
just the rough situation. And that's out of like New York Times and Bloomberg and all these other channels.
Yeah.
So it's just a very rough thing, because now it's like, you know, even when you're trying to get testing, you know, it's not going to show up on the tests.
Mm,
It's just, you know,
yeah.
it's
Crazy.
really, and it does seem like some kind of a biological weaponized thing for that reason alone. The kind of deviancy, the shadow of underneath the surface of, you know, and there's like
Yeah.
crazy, you know, music videos, and you know, they're like, oh, this thing is already within you, you know, all these things.
Right.
Madonna and everything. Madonna had a music video with her with a gas mask on, and other people dancing with gas masks on, and it's just like, that was, you know, a month before this thing happened, you know. So, and then the 201 summit as well, which is exactly the same virus that they were saying.
And how many mainstream movies have we had in the last 20 years about the zombie
pandemics.
apocalypse and like
Right.
all this? It's like fully fed into our unconscious narratives. Like we've just been waiting for something like this.
And the governments and the in the states and the governments out there, I don't think they're really reporting actual numbers to a large degree of what I'm seeing from my friends that are in Rome, for instance, and Italy. I mean, literally, they've been locked in their house of their own wishes, and you know, they're seeing, you know, people dying in parking lots in their cars, and on, you know, they can't get into hospitals. There's emergencies that aren't corona related. They can't be seen and they die. There's a lot worse situations going on in Italy just because of how the medical system's overwhelmed. So it's I mean, they're not able to find bodies in houses yet because they don't know that there's dead bodies, and it's just really, it's unbelievable. And Mount Shasta is a tourist attraction. Everyone wants to go there for the higher consciousness and all of that. So it's
exactly.
it's
The I-5 is coming right through. The I-5 is coming through, so people come off the I-5 and pull them quickly at the gas
right.
stations.
Yep.
You know, there's a little bit of an illusion that we're in some kind of protective bubble. You know,
Yep.
there's some truth to this. There's some truth, I think, you know, mind over matter. There's a metaphysical thing involved.
I know that for sure.
But
Totally.
but not everyone's there. Not everyone's there.
No.
And we still have to be responsible for the people who aren't there. And whatever we don't know. It's just, we got to include all of it.
Right. And you know, it's you know, that it seems like to me, and I would love your thought on this just intuitively, it just seems like there's been a multi-generational approach to this, where, you know, the Wi-Fi towers and the Wi-Fi and 5G, that's been reducing immune systems, that's been tested. So it's like you have this layer by layer by layer of immune reduction in the population, even by the food that they're eating and all this stuff. It's like, you know, it's like very, very small pieces added over time that could allow for something like this to have a bigger impact, because the population's greatly weakened, you know. So it's a rough situation, I'm sure, in their shoes, because they're just looking at it as like, well, you know, we're about to have mass starvation and all this, and we have to start depopulation. So I understand probably from their perspective, they're incredibly rough emergency brake, but it is very much inhumane. So anyway, rough.
Rough situation, totally. And
I hope we rebuild a new world from the ashes. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, whoever of us that are conscious and awake, and we have still the solutions to carry over into this new rebuilding. There will be a rebuilding, I'm hoping, with definitely a lot less people, you know, a lot less people. But I hope we can still survive. If we're like the lifeboats, it's going to be our duty to rebuild in a more holistic way that we always dream about. Anyway, any other comments? I don't want to hog the mic.
well, yeah, that's been my take for a while now.
Can I
A
jump
lot of the
in?
work I'm yeah, just one second. A lot of the work I'm
Sure.
doing is to, like even if I didn't survive, if a global catastrophe happens, I'm not saying it's going to happen. This could roll over in maybe 2 months. This just goes away, and maybe it comes back in another year or something like that, and we finally get a vaccine, we get it under control. Like there's the Spanish flu that happened 100 years ago. That was one of the biggest pandemics in our history 100 years ago. We haven't had anything like that happen since. But that killed, I think, 150 million people within something like 18 months or something like this. Pretty
Yep.
drastic. But anyways, yeah, I think it based on what you said. Yeah, either we are the lifeboat, or we make the seeds that the future generations will find again.
Right. Hmm.
Like at least don't, like all this wisdom we've been called, all this wisdom and knowledge we've been cultivating, especially the alternative community for the last couple of decades, from the 1960s to now. We have a lot of knowledge around new social models, new technological models of building a new world that's just being so suppressed because of the inertia of the previous conditioning. But if there's a full breakdown for decades or centuries or something like this, and humanity kind of goes into a dark cave for a while and reemerges later, one idea is, how do we preserve the seeds of our wisdom now so that at least those will be
Right.
found? That's something I thought about a lot too.
Our ancestors did it in stone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Gordon.
The name's Dharmendra.
Someone wanted to speak.
Nice to meet you.
Oh,
so
Dharmendra.
Yeah, Dharmendra. That's the name. Thank you. So, Michael, I just would like your thoughts too, and because I like how you think. But what do you think about the whole thing that they're talking about with the powers that be wanting to reduce the population down to like 1 billion people, and the thought that maybe this coronavirus easily seeded through the population of humanity because of all the thought viruses and everything else we're being fed through the media and all that, and how easy it was once it was figured out how to line it up correctly, mind, body, whatever, that it could spread so quickly. And I think this is just a test run, actually. What do you think about that?
Okay, thanks. Great question. Honestly, it's a really good question. And honestly, this gets into what I had probably intended to talk about today. I think early in the week, I was like, what should we talk about this week? How about shadow work? How about the whole concept of the global shadow and shadow work, which is just like, we could probably spend weeks or months or years talking about this. And that's the topic that the question goes into. And what I remember is that about 10 years ago, I think it's around 2010 or 2010, 2011, there was a lot of conspiracy stuff, new conspiracy stuff emerging after the wake of 9/11 still. And I decided one day, it's like, guys, I was kind of like on the surface of a lot of these conspiracy theories. And there's this whole idea of the secret society and the Illuminati and all these secret actors operating in the world, which I was very much aware of. But I was like, why? I really want to get to the bottom of this. I really want to really understand why if this is the case, and why it would be the case if this is true. And so I just stopped everything I was doing, and for about 2 or 3 months, I just dove into it just by myself. I was like not wanting to spread it around. I wasn't like piping it out to my social media. I was just going deeply, deeply, deeply into all the data that was available around this, and came up with my own conclusions. Now, this was 10 years ago. I still kind of keep up with this, but I keep up with this in a different way now. But just to say, the conclusion I came up with then is yes, of course. Yes, of course, there are people or groups of people in the world, maybe multiples of them, who are conspiring in ways to take great control and power in the world. It just makes sense that might be a possibility in a world with billions of people. So of course they exist. and of course, maybe some of them are so hidden that we don't even know who they are. We never know who they are, or who they are. But as what would their motivations be behind this? What's the real motivation? And part of that is I think what's already been alluded to here, is that some of these groups, they have massive resources. They have more money than we can ever imagine. So they have like this massive think tanks of the smartest people available and the best technologies and all this. So they're really good at sifting through knowledge and making statistic trends and, extrapolating where the future's going and all this. And they probably have a realistic foot on the idea of just where the world's currently at. And that one of the problems is that we're overpopulated. And so they could, think about that, go, how will we get the world less populated? And maybe it's just that by running the numbers, there just was no practical way to stop people from continuing to populate without some kind of radical intervention or something. And that in their mind, that they would be doing somewhat of a patriotic or, deeply humanitarian act by secretly kind of like managing that for the sake of a greater society in the future, that they've been, this new world order and all. In their minds, that's a good thing, and it's aligned with their
ends justify the
means. I could totally see how they would be thinking this way, especially if they're sociopaths. And there are sociopaths in the world, and sociopaths tend to group together in power structures like this, and they just don't feel the empathy that we would feel in an act like that, so they can totally justify it. So that could totally be a real reality. And the thing is here, like I'm not necessarily convinced that there's like one group doing that. There might be factions of groups doing that. They might even be competing with each other in various ways. An analogy to this is the CIA. Like we tend to have this vision of the CIA as being like this, completely, singularly directed organization that has so much control over everything in the world. And that's actually not the truth. Even within the CIA, there's levels of corruption, inside the organization where their factions are competing with each other and they're keeping secrets from each other and all this kind of stuff. I think it just makes sense that just like you go out into the wilderness, things are very distributed. You have all kinds of wild things going on. Things aren't that very well organized. I don't think they're as organized as we think they are. I think that we tend to project a lot more organization onto those kinds of actions that are happening. And so I often think that things are very much often a mix of some of that truth and also other things, meaning like in this case, I'm just not convinced yet. Like I can totally get the narrative around this being an engineered initiative. But who's involved? What about Trump? The way that Trump is responding has just been ridiculous, and he might have it. It's just, I don't know. I just have a way of really balancing, kind of holding the conspiracy frames in my mind while also just being really open to things being very, very different. And maybe this is just, a natural organic virus that got out of control and this kind of thing. But that's also not to discount that, yes, there are people in the world, like we know about the, there are people in the world that do have this agenda, or they believe in this agenda, to depopulate the world. And for example, we have, I remember in my conspiracy theory research, I found there's those stones in Georgia in America. Probably some of us are familiar with
he might have it.
These Georgia Guidestones, where someone, we don't know who necessarily, but this kind of Stonehenge stones arrangement in Georgia that declare these principles as if it'll be this, standing relic of guiding principles after the catastrophe, to like only have a certain, I think it was like 1.5 million or something like this, like some very low amount of population.
500
they say only sustain the population at 500 million. So clearly, just as someone put that there means there's people thinking about this. And then you corroborate that with the Denver airport, which is a very interesting place, and all the weirdness going on there and all the symbolism of the paintings and stuff like that. There's definitely people thinking about this stuff. Now, with that said, here's the whole other side of that. That's basically the conclusion I came to 10 years ago. Since then, I've gone much further and deeper into what I would call the metaphysical and psychic side of this, and psychological side of this, which is much, much, much deeper. Part of that is considering that even those people, those sociopaths, are having extremes, what is controlling them, right? That's another consideration. Way too much to go into today.
But just for future to plant a seed for a conversation in the future. I'd love to go at it with you about higher intelligence that's kind of gone crooked and is behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's a whole, and I know there's no way we could go into that now. I know.
Yeah, let's bookmark that one. That's a very deep conversation. But
Yeah.
before we even go to there, like this would even maybe even encompass that. What I'm about to say next is like, let's talk about it from a Jungian perspective, which has come up more than once in these chats. Carl Jung, who in my mind is one of the greatest heroes of our human history. He is one of the deepest thinkers we have recorded in our books. He's profound. He's done some pioneering research into what's really going on here in reality from a psychological perspective. And he coined the term the shadow. Okay. So what the shadow is, in a very, direct, literal sense, with the way he meant it, he meant the shadow mostly in an individual sense that, everyone has a shadow, and a person's shadow are the elements of our consciousness or our mind that are not looked at, basically, that are not integrated in yet into our awareness and our conscious awareness, right? That's basically the shadow. And that can include all kinds of things. That can include suppressed memories from childhood. That can include, trauma content from childhood. That could include, behaviors or characteristics about ourselves that we that are dysfunctional, but we don't fully embrace at the same time, we're not fully aware of, or other things that are really good about it. Even it can include things that are good qualities that we suppress and aren't fully looking at too. But it can also include things like ancestral influences, effects in our DNA that we're still piping through our ancestors, all kinds of trauma and effects from that. That's basically what's meant by the shadow. So it's what we're not recognizing in ourselves that's still, but yet it still has an influence in our lives. So if we're not fully conscious of it, that means it's unconscious. By the definition of unconscious, it means we are not conscious of it. People get confused about that. Think, oh, I totally see my shadow. I see all of it. No, if it's in your shadow, you don't see it. That's the whole point. And so the idea of Jungian psychology is this process of individuation where you're gradually bringing those things up, and maybe it comes across a lifetime or many lifetimes, and integrating those into a whole and healthy person and becoming your most actualized best self. Okay, so that's what's happening at an individual level. Now we could also say that collectively, we could compile all our shadows, and we have a collective shadow. And you can also say even just as a collective, we kind of hold some kind of like collective shadow, both traits, both positive and negative, that we have as a collective that we aren't fully recognizing. Just for example, like we have such great potential as a species. We're an incredibly creative and innovative and ingenious species. And we have an amazing world. We have an extraordinary, complex, and innovative world, and yet it could be so much better. We could step so much further into our potentials, and maybe we are going to do that. But and I've also referenced before as another example in these talks around this possibility of having had a cometary impact just 13,000 years ago here on Earth that almost wiped out the human species. That is, we have relics of in our collective memory of the Great Flood and fire and brimstone falling from the sky. That's in all our universal myths, and yet it's barely recollected. And that information is beginning to come out now scientifically. We're beginning to actually get real hard evidence that there was multiple cometary fragments impacting the Earth about 13,000 years ago that caused a global cataclysm that would be part of our collective shadow that may very well be influencing how we're behaving today in co-creating these ridiculous crises we're in, because we haven't fully integrated our shadow, right? That's another example of how our collective shadow would be going. So with that said, to get to your question, it's just like, I also look at, if there is this kind of agenda, if there are certain individuals or groups in our world that are evil, sociopathic, evil agendas that they think they're doing the right thing, they've justified it for themselves, yet it's happening. We can say that in some ways they're an embodiment of our collective shadow, and that both it starts to get tricky to talk about, but I think that they're an embodiment of that. They're the ones that were expressing that collective shadow, and that by we by blaming, like it's appropriate if we can identify those actors, you know, with what's happening recently. You know, certain individuals are coming out, like the thing that happened with Weinstein or whatever his name is, finally got put in jail. Like he was acting out of his shadow. We finally went through the process, and we're punishing him. That was appropriate, but at the same time, I think that part of the solution to resolving this idea of the collective shadow acting on the world is for each of us as individuals to own our own shadow. And that has some kind of metaphysical effect in, I think, mitigating the maximum expression of the collective shadow through these things in the rest of the world.
So what do you think, Michael, about the thought that there's a whole spectrum? Because I agree with you, because he was my favorite first major guy I read at 17 back in the 70s. I loved him. It's, for me, it was personality types that got me hooked into it. And then I went into everything. But there's like a spectrum of shadow. And when you get down into these really deep areas of collective unconsciousness, not just subconscious, because with the subconscious, you can actually start to get a hang of, and with the help of our collective friends, your shadow, and then start to open that up, you know, with that kind of support. But as you go down deeper in the spectrum, way down into like the lineage of our genetics over thousands of years, and these things that we've been passing on that could have been seeded into us as seeds from like thousands of years ago from these, you know, higher intelligence beings through our leadership, that started to put thought viruses and emotional viruses and physical viruses into us, where we, you know what I mean? That's another subject that I think would be interesting to open up.
Yeah. Well, it isn't to open up. And I was thinking about that this morning. I was thinking about this current situation with the virus, and how I came up with this idea that I see 3 different viruses happening in one, right? First, there's the media virus. There's just the idea of the fear behind the virus that's linked to all the movies we watched about zombie apocalypse and all this. That's a virus in itself that's very dangerous. That's more dangerous. It's dangerous in some ways than the actual biological virus, right? So we don't need that media virus, but yet it's there. So we have to be able to like monitor ourselves and how we're interacting with that. Then there's the actual biological virus. It's real. It's a biological virus. It operates like viruses do. Whether it was engineered or not, it doesn't matter. It's still a virus. And then I give this idea of a third virus, which maybe when we were talking about a fourth here, the third virus is what I was coming up with, that there were there's a couple seeds like this. One seed I've noticed, I think especially like in an American virus, like we're kind of there's a virus of being afraid of fear itself. Like we just kind of like, it's a virus of denial, honestly. Where when there's a real danger, we tend to want to say it's the sociopaths did it. It's all 100% a huge conspiracy. It's not real at all. They're making up every single bit of the news. No one's getting sick. That's a virus too. It's almost like a fear of fear, and it's like a need to be kind of above it all. And that's a virus. And then I think you're talking about maybe a fourth virus in this, and just that, how would you put it exactly? Just that these higher intelligences.
Well, it's like the whole. If you're really into all this, you know, as you've said you are into all these conspiracy things, then this whole technological development was a plant too. And seen from the highest perspective, it was really to develop our minds and our problem-solving capacities in relation to the material world. And it was only supposed to be, you know, temporary, which is one story. But then there's a deeper story that goes on, that goes back tens of thousands of years, where there actually was a curveball thrown by higher intelligence that actually got into our genetics through, you know, mating, through higher beings of a male, of the male, you know, mating with our females, and actually bringing through that kind of fallen mind genetic tendency. And it, you know, I don't even know if anymore there's that presence of that fallen mind directly influencing us, but through our genetics, through a long period of time, something's come through that's made us all prone to apathy and falling asleep and eating McDonald's and doing all these idiotic things that we do that create so much suffering around the world. I mean, it's real. If you take a look at it, it's there, it's physical, it's around us all the time. What the hell created that field of It's
Right.
not just that we're going through and evolving and this is a step we got to go through. There's a lot more going on there that's a lot more fallen, it seems to me, than it should, symmetrically be. You know what I'm saying?
Good point. Well, good point. This is one of my favorite conversations, and we're going right there to the crux of it. Here's my perspective on this, and I think what you're alluding to by the technology virus. This is something that just actually came into my awareness in the last several months, and Melissa and I have talked about it before. I think when Jamin and Melissa and I were down in Berkeley, it was a conversation that then took on a lot of synchronicity, because a good friend of mine, one of my previous professors from the California Institute of Integral Studies, David Ulansey. I went to visit him sometime after we had this conversation in Berkeley, and he also spoke about the same thing within days. I think it came from Steiner. Yeah, Melissa was referencing Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, and then my friend David brought out a book about Steiner and was referencing this name. I can't remember the name of it now. If Melissa's here, she could probably bring it up. It's called, I think it starts with an A Dondaman or something like this. It's a name for, Ahriman, there we go. Ahriman. And as I understand it, I think my understanding is complete, but somewhat general, that Ahriman, it was a specific entity of intelligence, let's call it that exists out there with some other entities of intelligence, and there's with some benefic intelligence to it too, but somehow Ahriman is kind of like on the fence a bit. And that he is basically responsible for what you're saying, the seeds of technology going way back in our history. The very, very, very seeds that kind of got our minds going to the extent of now where we're at in creating these network technology and all this.
Mhm.
And you know what? My sense is there's some truth to it. There's some truth to it, at least, even in the extreme cases, it's an analogy or metaphor story, which I don't think it is. I think there is some truth to it. But even in that case, I think there's something about what we've done with technology that's semi not fully good, right? I think we've talked about this before too, just the fact that if you look at the trends of technology, I've been involved with information technology for 20 years, as a developer, as a designer, as an architect. I've been very much involved in it. And I've had so much optimism and promise around this technology for delivering good in the world. And it does do that, yet mostly I see that it doesn't. And mostly I see that it kind of keeps steering us into these dark places. And I'm okay with this. Here's why, because I think there's some truth to this, but here's what I see is that I see the opportunity in it. And I think if we have to kind of go to a deeper level with it in what would be a psycho-spiritual perspective of really what the dance is, what the balance is between what we might call light and dark forces, or we might call, higher intelligence and lower intelligence.
Well, to really get at this, if you don't mind my saying so, I think we'd have to open up, and I think you're familiar with the 7 bodies transmission, right? Physical, etheric, astral, mental, causal.
Yeah.
I believe it goes Buddhic, atmic, and monadic, and that, and in my experience, that's real. That's not just words. And it seems to me that the way that we need to start to take a perspective on it, because there's memories in each of those bodies too. And there's got to be a way for us to start to open that up and develop it if we really want to get at this stuff. Because to me, what you're discussing is really the central issue of what's really going on in terms of this planet and what's shaking it on so many levels. And there's so many unknowns because we really haven't delved into the full extent of our, intelligence field, which is a big field, and it's, and so you have to kind of get past that, just, I guess, that place where you would tend to disbelieve that we're anything more than just which maybe a lot of people have.
That's the first step. The first step is becoming aware of the greater layers of reality, what's actually going on. And that can take some time. And I mean, that's not even the place of all people either. Some people they aren't meant to do that in this life. The first, become aware of it first. And it can be daunting and scary and overwhelming.
But if sorry, go ahead.
And then I think in my perspective, what the final step really is, and this gets back to what the Gnostics talked about a lot from a Gnostic perspective, or we might even borrow an alchemical perspective of where ultimately the whole point of all of this, of the whole of reality, is integration and coherency. It's just about integrating these two sides. We talk about duality, light. What do you want to call it? Light and dark, or good and bad, or whatever. It's about, or let's talk about unconscious shadow and conscious mind. Higher, higher intelligence, really higher intelligence, and deeply unconsciousness. There's this interplay between the two, and it's not about separating out and going, we can only have high thoughts, and we must reject the darker entities and intelligences. Then we're losing already. Then we're in the fight. That's all that the lower intelligence is going for. That's where all the energy comes from to keep the lower intelligence going.
I think you hit the crux there.
It's about fully embracing somehow developing the capacity for enough finesse and grace and intelligence on our own in a middle way to be able to embrace those shadow elements and gently lift them and integrate them into our own intelligence. And there's a great freedom in that. And I think that's the way it's actually designed.
Well, let me open one more thing with you.
Let me just finish the thought. It's like there's a symbiotic relationship, just like you find out in the forest. Like you go out in the forest and like you're walking on the forest, and what do you mostly see? You're seeing trees with birds and light up here and all this. We very rarely think about what's just below our feet. There's this whole system of ecology, and that's part of the reality. It's actually a good metaphor for what this reality is, because like in the forest, we don't see everything underground. You have all this dark, gicky mud and rocks and worms and scary insects and all these weird things going on down. It's very different from what's on top with all the light and all the tweeting birds. And yet both of these things together make the ecosystem. You can't have one without the other. And so there's this balancing point between the two. Yep. And that's fundamentally what the human condition is moderating that balance. It's not one overcoming the other. It's the balance between the two. And so to bring it back to Andaman, wherever his name is, I think Ahriman, we want to engage with the technology while also being aware of all this. And I think this project of engendering collective intelligence is just a perfect example of where that balance can be found.
And I think you totally nailed it on that too. And I also just want to throw in one more thing, and then I got to go just to leave a thought, because there's obviously a lot of seeds we can plant into the future for these kind of discussions, which I think is really cool stuff. But the whole other side of it is we as humans have this capacity with certain tools to, meditation, but a lot of other tools these days, not just meditation. There's so many other ways to get in touch with meditation. And basically all we have to do is clean out our lower, our thinking, our conditioned thinking, feeling, and physical, because the higher centers are already functioning perfectly. The only problem is our lower centers are so messed up, we can't still them enough to be receptive to their influence. And so I just want to kind of throw that into the mix too, as a way we can start to develop a strategy, maybe into where we'd like to go with this discussion, in ways we can start to find some headway into realistic applications, especially through technology. It would be one way to start to link up the thinking, the feeling, and the moving centers. I know we could do it through technology in really cool ways, through games or other challenges that could start to develop skills in us to come up against certain challenges and develop, the shadows through our gifts and stuff, and through our genius. I like to call it genius, and that kind of thing. So I'll just leave it with that wide open. And I love always discussing with you, Michael. And I gotta take off. Michael. So
thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, it's fun, and I love playing question with you. That's fun. I'll do that anytime.
You too. Great.
Take care.
See you next time.
Yep. Bye, Jamin, Nolan, everybody who I've met, James, Dylan, Myra, everybody else who I don't know yet, but lovely meeting you all.
Farewell.
Thank you, Dharmendra. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for...
Yep.
And we'll be going strong, so join us later.
I really enjoy listening to the two of you go off. That's super interesting. I found a segment on Ahriman that I thought was interesting a while ago, that I think was actually inspired by a conversation between you and Melissa Gaio, but I think Jamin and I were also there. Anyways, this is from the Wikipedia page on anthroposophy, which I believe was the field Rudolf Steiner created. And in a segment on ethics, it says, the anthroposophical view is that the good is found in the balance between two polar influences on world and human evolution. These are often described through their mythological embodiments as spiritual adversaries which endeavor to tempt and corrupt humanity, Lucifer and his counterpart, Ahriman.
Yeah, that's right.
These have both positive and negative aspects. Lucifer is the light spirit, which, quote, plays on human pride and offers the delusion of divinity, unquote, but also motivates creativity and spirituality. Ahriman is the dark spirit that tempts human beings to, quote, deny their link with divinity and to live entirely on the material plane, unquote, but that also stimulates intellectuality and technology. Both figures exert a negative effect on humanity when their influence becomes misplaced or one-sided, yet their influences are necessary for human freedom to unfold. So.
Perfect, Nolan. That's great. Yeah, that really articulates it well. Yeah, and you know, how we bring that back to the beginning of the conversation with this virus situation. You know, again, my perspective is to kind of take a balanced approach with it, keeping both these sides in mind. There's a metaphysical, psychospiritual, conspiracy element, and there's also just a practical day-to-day, like how do we deal with this now? Yeah, I think Steiner is probably another good resource. I've only read a little bit of Steiner, but he's right up there with Jung. I have a lot of my friends who are into Jung are really into Steiner too.
I wish Melissa was here because I want to know more, but I saw like just scrolling through the Wikipedia page that he's associated with the Waldorf schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you founded the Waldorf School.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was really a multi-dimensional character, just operating in many different areas. You know, I think he founded Waldorf. He basically laid the foundations for permaculture. I think fundamentally comes from Rudolf Steiner, and he was very much into astrology and some probably one of the most esoteric and explorative of astrological resources. He just went into some really interesting areas with astrology and archetypes, which he integrated with permaculture and everything else. So he was very like expansive and diverse, but at the same time very integrative in all his approaches, and health and all this kind of stuff.
Well, speaking of health and the shadow, I would actually love to squeeze in a nap at some point, and that would require.
Where is Melissa at?
Oh, she's actually in training until like 5 o'clock today, and then she also has training tomorrow. Yeah, it's
what kind of training? I'm just curious.
A teacher, artist teacher training.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking maybe let her know that we had this conversation, and maybe we could extend this topic into next week. I was actually intuiting it. I was thinking, we could have a conversation on the shadow this week and maybe have that for a couple of weeks or something like that, since it's such a big topic. It'd be great to bring in Melissa and the gender again, and really just go into it, it's definitely appropriate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, great. Thanks for the opportunity again, Jamin.
Heck
Good
yeah.
to see
Thank you, Michael.
Nolan. Yeah.
Thank you.
And enjoy your nap.
Thank you. Thank you.
And until next time.
Participating. Thank you for your time. It was a great, wonderful
It was,
conversation.
absolutely. I'm glad we got to do this. Yeah. And speak with you all next week.
All right, Michael. We'll
Thank
see
you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Peace.
Thanks, Michael. I've been listening all the time, just riveted with the conversation. And I know I've been a bit quiet all night, unusual for an Irishman, so to speak. But I think that's the mood here in Ireland anyway at the moment. It's
Right.
quiet and it's I think reflective now, and I think it's reflective all over the world, and I think it reflects in the conversation that we're having here tonight as well. The general sense and the general mood is kind of down in everybody, I think, globally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For once, I think we have a collective feeling going on around the world, but it's one of apprehension now and fear, I think, and you know, questioning and everything else. Everybody has questions now. Everybody, as Michael was saying there, like the media, you know, the amount of information and misinformation that's been going out there from the start, like it has left everybody in a complete quandary as to what to believe about. And I'm only on about just the one thing here now, and this is the coronavirus, like, but it's because it's so on everybody's doorstep now, so to speak, that they just can't, you know, they can't choose now to turn away from it or say, oh, I don't want to hear about that, or I don't want to know about it. Don't get me wrong, there's still people here still carrying on as if, yeah, should that one bother me? That's not going to happen to me. But sure, we all know, you know, these are the famous last words usually, like, but I don't want to get sidetracked. I just want to state like that. The conversations that I was listening there tonight, no, and there was, you know, again, a myriad of conversations, and I just sat back and absorbed it because I was also absorbing the general sense, and you can almost feel the emotion in the air here in Ireland, and I think it seems to be a common thing because you could feel it online here now with you, all of you here as well, like, and we're all speaking from different parts of the world as well, like, so I just want to, you know, remind everybody anyway, like, that we have to be positive. I know it's something now that it's going, as I said, it's on all our doorsteps now, like, so it's going to take all our focus for a while, like, but as you were saying earlier in the conversation, we are all going to be more or less starting to be kind of confined indoors now for a while, and we'll start getting the cabin fever and start to be wondering, you know, what will keep us occupied. And a lot of people will venture online, and now's our opportunity. And I don't like to say this in a sense like that to use a bad situation, but to make a, you know, to make an opportunity of it. But in a sense, like, kind of have to seize that opportunity in the next coming days and weeks that people will be indoors and online, and now's the opportunity to start getting out there with whoever. I'm not a social media person. I'm, you know, very kind of shy to this, as I said, like, so I'm not with all the different kind of different social medias out there and different links and all that, but I know plenty of you guys are anyway, like, but you all have your own ways of reaching out online. But now is the time to reach out online, like, and start letting people out there who are not in the know somehow get it flashed up in front of their faces. The collective intelligence, you know, you want to get involved in a conversation to help solve problems, like including coronavirus, whatever. Just, I don't know, I'm just rambling here now, but I'm just saying that we have to remain positive. Like, we have to. I know it's all kind of seems doomy gloomy, you know, and the what ifs were coming into the earlier conversation tonight about, you know, the global masking and the global dimming, and airplanes being shut down now, and industries being shut down all over the place. And yeah, they're all things that are coming into play, but they're only more reason for us to focus even harder, no, and realize the urgency that we are now, and most people will start to realize is also on their doorsteps. I mean, soon enough, the coronavirus will settle into people and you know, people will get accustomed just to the idea that we're all in this situation. But you know, as and somebody said as well, in the next couple of coming months, it's not just the coronavirus, but the tipping points, you know, all the things that are going to start happening because of, you know, the global masking and everything. Is little parts of those things will start coming into play. Weather anomalies are already going crazy. Anyway, I don't know if you guys keep up with I look at a lot of different news channels because I have the time on my hands now at the moment, and I look at a lot of different news channels from all over the world on YouTube. But there's a couple of guys there that called the Two Preachers, and what they do is they make a collection of on-the-spot news reports from people all over the world. They just, you know, catching things on their phones and video and on-the-spot news, and that's not put on mainstream media, like, but they get a compilation of all this. And they've been doing it now over the last number of months. I've been kind of following this since last November of last year, or even September of last year. Every month, even sometimes even twice a month, they put out a new video with just a few links of or a few videos of what's going on around the world. But just to get a general look at it, most people don't see any of that news at all at the moment. They're not seeing it. They're being, you know, hoodwinked with all the crap that they be on the mainstream media anyway at the moment. So while they're online, I think we should seize that. Like, we should take avail of that opportunity to try and spread it out there online now, while people are kind of going to be confined to their houses. Like, I'm enjoying the talk, and as I said, I'm quiet myself as well tonight, making up for it here now again. Like, but I'm generally quiet because I'm contemplating not only on the conversations, but I'm contemplating on, you know, I've been speaking to some of my family, and I've been on to friends there during the week and sent a lot of them the links to get in here. I know some of them have been having difficulty to get on tonight, and I have to apologise on behalf of my friend Eddie there earlier. I phoned him a couple of times during the conversation there because he couldn't figure out how to switch off, and because, you know, he's like myself, he's a dinosaur when it comes to computers, but he's a very old dinosaur. So he couldn't figure it out, and he was cursing a little at the computer, but he didn't realise his mute button wasn't on either, so he didn't realise he was even coming out across the conversation earlier. But I phoned him, and he's after switch. I told him how to get it out, get it off anyway. But on his behalf, I apologise, but I'm just glad that he did show up today, like, and he stuck with it there for the day. And I know Natalie and them were on earlier, but I also just letting anyone that might be watching on video or on YouTube and couldn't get in the link there tonight or whatever here in Ireland, or anyone that I sent out the link to, I just wanted to say, like, there's no bother. Like, try again next week anyway. And I know mostly anyway are preoccupied, as most people are, with the coronavirus, but it's not the biggest of our problems anyway at the moment, by no means. So I'm sorry, I went on a bit too much.
No, you're fine, James. So I'd just like to request a little